Well, good morning, everybody. Today we're continuing in the Old Testament book of Daniel, and we're looking at chapter 4. And we've remembered that Daniel and actually his three friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, were taken into exile at the prime of their life, just about when they were to become young leaders in the nation of Judah. They find themselves in exile, and they begin to distinguish themselves, though, under King Nebuchadnezzar. Nebuchadnezzar recognizes their gifts and abilities, and especially Daniel's gift to interpret dreams, because Nebuchadnezzar seems to have a lot of dreams, and nobody else in his kingdom can interpret them quite like Daniel. And we read in the very first verses that the king continues to have a struggle. We see in the first couple of verses that he gives at least lip services to Daniel's God, but he's also very impressed with himself. We read in Daniel verse 4, it says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was living in my palace of comfort and prosperity. A little bit later, we get a similar vision. It seems like this is a pattern of Nebuchadnezzar's. He says, 12 months later, he was taking a walk on the flat roof of the royal palace in Babylon, and he looked out across the great city, and he said, look at this great city of Babylon. By my own power, I have built this beautiful city as my royal residence to display my majestic splendor. And so we find out that God is just about ready to deal with Nebuchadnezzar and his obvious pride, his obvious fact that he is really caught up with himself. And so in verse 10, he begins to describe to Daniel this dream that God gives him. He says, while I was lying in my bed, this is what I dreamed. I saw a large tree in the middle of the earth. The tree grew very tall and strong, reaching high into the heavens for all to see. It had fresh green leaves, and it was loaded with fruit for all to eat. Wild animals lived in its shade, and birds nested in its branches, and all the world was fed from this particular tree. And then he calls Daniel to interpret it, and this is what Daniel tells him. In verse 22, he says, that tree, your majesty, is you, for you have grown strong and great. Your greatness reaches up to the heaven, and your rule to the ends of the earth. And skipping down to verse 25 at the end, but Daniel says, but this is what you need to learn, Nebuchadnezzar, that the Most High rules over the kingdoms of the world and gives them to anyone he chooses. Nebuchadnezzar, this isn't about you. This is about God. It's been an amazing gift to you. And Daniel's not done. In verse 27, he continues on. He says, Nebuchadnezzar, please accept my advice. Stop sinning and do what's right. Break from your wicked past. Now we have to understand that Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar have a history together. And Daniel is speaking the truth out of his relationship with Nebuchadnezzar, but it's not out of hatred. He doesn't pull any punches. He tells the truth because Daniel cares about Nebuchadnezzar, but at the same time, he's given him some very tough love. Nebuchadnezzar, you're a very wicked man. Let's finish verse 27. He says, stop sinning and do what is right. Break from your wicked past and what? Be merciful to the poor. Perhaps then you will continue to prosper. Nebuchadnezzar, are you willing to confess your sin? Because obviously that was God's biggest challenge with Nebuchadnezzar. He neglected the poor in favor of his own lavish buildings projects. Now, please know that Daniel's doing some serious meddling here. And the king does not hear Daniel. In verse 31, we read on. It says, while these words were still in the mouth, a voice called down from heaven, O King Nebuchadnezzar, this message is for you. You are no longer ruler of this kingdom. Nebuchadnezzar had to learn in a very painful way. We usually call this hitting bottom. He had to endure, as we read on, 7 years of torture. He suffered from a of a mental illness that drove him away from people and caused some very, very strange symptoms too. In verse 34, we pick it up, though. It says, "After this time had passed, I, Nebuchadnezzar, looked up to heaven. My sanity returned, and I praised and I worshiped the Most High and honored the One who lives forever. His rule is everlasting, and his kingdom is eternal." Nebuchadnezzar is saying, I came to my senses. I'm not self-sufficient. He realized that he needed God. You see, God has this amazing gift for each person. It's called grace, and it's free. It can't be earned. But in order to receive it, we have to honestly admit our need for God. Nebuchadnezzar finally got to that place. Verse 34, "I lifted my eyes towards heaven." That's Nebuchadnezzar's story. And you know what? God wants that to be our story too. God's heart is always a heart of grace. His grace is always a free gift. He's always ready to forgive. Jesus went to the cross and paid the price for our sin. And his desire is for us, each of us, to receive that free gift of love. And then we live our lives to say thanks. And so as we close today, these stories of Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar, I pray that you will also know his grace and peace today. Have an amazing day.
If these devotional videos are helpful to you, subscribe to our channel and click the notification button so you know when we post a new video. And of course, please share them with others.